and welcome to live stream number 49. Today is August 22nd, 2017, and thank you so much for taking the time to join today's live stream. Today's live stream, the topic is the inspect commands. And I have a suspicion that some of you guys haven't really had the time to dig in to really see what's in the drop down, and I think that, well, one or two of you hopefully will find some of this stuff useful. As always, if you are having any specific topics you would like to see covered on these live streams, go down to the description area of this video and you will find my email address, lars.christensen@autodesk.com, and you're absolutely more than welcome to send me a quick email with a topic suggestions. That is really what we're trying to do here. 15-20 minutes, just kind of like, trying to add a little bit more value to you guys getting in and using the different commands inside of Fusion 360. I can already see we got a bunch of people in here in the live stream. I really appreciate all of you guys taking the time out of your busy day to join. And of course, if you're watching the recording, that's the great thing about YouTube. If you can't make the live stream, it's all right. It's up on YouTube. If you're watching the recording, thank you so much. So let's talk a little bit about these inspect commands. So I pulled out this the plastic injection mold here. Some of you guys have probably already familiar with the video series where I went through the entire building this mold. But up here in the model tab, you have this inspection drop down, and there is really some really handy tools in here that you should know about. So the first one is measure. You can also hit the I on your keyboard for inspect, I guess. Measure tool. And I talked a little bit about that the other day when I was doing the live stream about if you came from another CAM software. So I'm not going to spend as much time as I did the other day going through this measuring tool. But you can select faces, of course, and you get a dimension that also displays over here. Remember, if you double click on the dimension over here, it will be stored on your computer clipboard, what can be handy when you paste it into like your calculator. If you select some vertices that are not on the same plane, then you can actually also check this XYZ delta that will give you, I think this is my preferred way to kind of like measure things like this. Give you the Z-axis, the X-axis, and the Y-axis. Well, actually, if you look up here, it's X and Z, but whatever. And the other thing that I pointed out that I think is really handy is this show snap points. When you do that, when you hover over a face, you really get, you can see here, every intersection midpoint gets highlighted to pick something. And the neat thing is that if you hold down the control key on a computer, on a Windows machine, sorry, not to indicate an Apple is not a computer, or command on an Apple, you can actually kind of like stay on that size, that side you have highlighted with those points. So that's the control key. If I don't, you will see that the measuring tool is trying to kind of like pick different surfaces, but if you're holding over a face and you hold down control, you kind of like lock that down and you can pick no matter if you're hovering over other fields. So the measure tool, I hope most of you guys have played around with it a little bit and is somewhat comfortable using the measure tool to kind of check things and work with things. Another tool that is in here that is I really like is the interference tool. And I actually used to have a rule back in the day when I used to create like a lot of different work holding fixtures for the shop floor. I was not allowed to release anything that was an assembly to the floor unless that I have gone through the interference detection. Because what happens many times when you're modeling things, I think I have this example here, kind of like have this for lathe chuck in here, and it's kind of funny when I pulled this one up, I actually didn't even know it until I ran this interference check. So what interference checks let you do is to select a series of components, and then you can go in here and click interference detection, and it will actually come up and show you if there is interference detection. So in this case here in red, it shows up that there is actually an interference detection between these parts. And like I said, honestly, when I put this together, what was a long time ago, I never used this tool. I never realized that I had made that mistake. So like I said, when I used to work as a shop floor supervisor designing all these different fixtures for these CNC machines, this inspection or this interference tool was absolutely necessary to make sure that you haven't made a mistake. Just to show you that in a section, we can use another tool that is here in the inspect dropdown, and that is the section analysis tool. So if I click on that, and I can just find a face here, we can go in and do a section analysis of the part. And if I go normal to here, you can actually see where these two are intersections. So the interference tool picked up this issue here. So these kind of tools can save you from a lot of trouble. I mean, like, if you're sending something to your customer with an interference, they don't catch it, they make it, well, it's you, right? Your mistake and your cost. Also know that you can include coincident faces, or faces that lays up against each other. So we've had a lot of talks about tolerances and so forth. So if you decided that you always are going to build in your tolerances in your model, then you could check this one and you would actually find out if you missed one of them. Now back to the section analysis tool here. This tool is just one of my favorites. I use this all the time. It's really good to kind of like, get a look into things. And if you hit OK, you should be aware of that it lives over here on the left in the section tool over here. And you can actually just turn it off. You can create more of them. You can right click over here and you can go back in and edit it. And, now if you watched the sculpting video yesterday, these handles, you are very familiar with these. You can go in here and actually pull in the handles also and really give you a close look. Another thing that I have done in the past, let me just delete this section here. Another thing I've done in the past is actually also creating like a plane and an angle, in a plane and an angle like this one here. So this one is in 90 degrees, and you can create, that plane, whatever you want, and then when you go into the section analysis tool, you can select that plane and use that too. So that's another way to kind of play with this section tool here. The next one is called curvature comp analysis, and this one ties kind of nicely into what we did yesterday. Actually, a couple of the next one does very well. So if we remember that ugly spoon I modeled up yesterday. So if you didn't watch yesterday's intro into sculpting, you should check it out. So I made this kind of spoon here just quickly. This is how good it got in 20 minutes or so. But what probably not my most proudest work, but whatever. If we go in here to the curvature comp analysis, we can select an edge, and what Fusion gives us is a kind of a outline of that curve that drives this edge. And this is really handy, again, when you're talking about what I call kind of like swoopy surfaces or kind of like curved edges. If I go in here and start a new design, and let's just go in on this, create a new sketch here. If I create a spline, and a spline is this interesting curvature tool we have inside of Fusion, where we get these handles, and these handles we can kind of like drag and pull and kind of like make a curve that is really, really flexible. And we have a handle in each point in here. So if I go in right now and create another sketch, so let's go in on this plane. Where do I want to go? Let's go in on this. Let's go in on this face here and create a sketch. And if I go in here and just create some, now I'm just freestyling a little bit. Create a little rectangle. And we, for example, went in and used something like a sweep. So we're going to select our profile. It's going to be the square here. And select the path. It's going to be this part here. So now we kind of like have this solid curve. If I go and look at it from the right side here, so this is kind of like, again, I got a couple of sketches, but this here is that first sketch that is kind of like that spline that is driving this shape. So what we can do with this curvature comp is we can go in and select this adds, and it will really give us a better indication of how the flow is of this kind of spline. What when you're sitting on a computer screen, it can really sometimes be hard to see if you have a nice kind of flow on the part, where when you go in and you turn on this curvature, you can kind of get a better idea about how sharp the flow is. So that is this curvature comp, but it's used a lot when you're building up like curves on, especially I think, consumer products. Like if you're building a car and talking about aerodynamics, this here, you will see that if I turn curvature comp on, that there's actually a little bit of a bump right here, and then there, of course, if the wind was coming from left to right, it would kind of like, there was something would happen right here. If it was coming from right to left, it clearly hits a wall right here. The next one in here is zebra analysis, and I will also say curvature map analysis. They are also used, if we go back to our spoon, to get an idea about how these different shapes that is of the spoon are kind of floating together. So if I go in and turn on the zebra analysis and I click on the part here, and don't stare, this is like a solar eclipse, don't stare too much as I'm rotating this part around, or you might get dizzy. But what it shows us now, if you saw this, you saw yesterday that I used symmetry between these two. So this is fairly good, but you can see how there's like some flow things between the handle and the spoon. And zebra analysis, you can see here, you can really control how fine you want to make this, but it gives you kind of an idea about how the flow of these different surfaces are together. Same thing if you go and look at the curvature map. You will also see here that it shows you, it's probably easiest to see on the spoon portion of itself. There's a sharp curve here, then it smooths it out a little bit, right? Same thing if you go back and look at kind of like the handle, you can see how, it goes red here because of the curvature is changing. So these are really good when you're working with something like sculpting we talked about yesterday, to give you an idea how these kind of like flow together. Now, the one I just skipped is draft analysis. And draft analysis is really used mostly for plastic injection, I think. So you get a part from a customer, and this may be not the best example, but one of the things you have to do on most plastic parts is you have to add draft. And the reason you're adding draft is so the plastic part can actually get out of the mold. So pick up any kind of like plastic box you have around you, and you will see a plastic part normally has a little bit of draft, a couple of degrees or something, depending on what type of material it is. And the draft analysis is what it does, is you can select a part, and then you can control the direction of it, but mostly I think is you normally use a plane or something like that. So if I can select this plane, let's see this one, and it will show you, you can control in here like the draft, and you can see, you can even turn on like high quality in here, but you can see possibly where you want to lay your parting line depending on the color changes in here, and that will change depending on kind of like what you do with these draft analysis tool. So it will show you kind of on the model, you see that it kind of like changes color when we get below or under the draft in here. Also be aware of with all these, there is this eye icon down here. If you click on that, you actually get more information. Sometimes I forget that myself, that this is down here, and you can click for a link out. So you can definitely go and explore these yourself. We already talked about the section analysis. That's a tool I use all the time. Center of mass can actually also be very neat tool. So if we go back into this chart here, the center of mass, well, if I just select one component and hit OK, you will see that we get a center of mass showing up right in the center of our part here. And it actually shows up in your analysis tool over here. But if you have multiple components inside of a part, so let's select a couple of more components in here and hit OK, you will actually see that now the center of mass have shifted over a little bit. And for some people, this is huge because you put an assembly together of something, and you really need to know where about is the center of mass. Think about something that's got to be lifted up in a crane or something like that. Being able to know where the center of mass is extremely helpful tool. And I should say too, I believe this shows up in your drawings, 2D drawings, and also you can measure to it. So if I hit measure up here, then you will see that I can actually select it as one of my measuring points. So not only is it just there visually showing where the center of mass is, but you can actually use it for something practical like seeing where the center of the mass of your part is. The last one you should know about is a component color cycling tool. And I, the first time, whoops, where is it? There it is. I, the first time, got aware of this tool by mistake. If you look down here, you will see Shift-N is the shortcut to turn it on and off. You can see that right over here to the right. Somehow I hold down Shift and N somehow, and suddenly you get these very interesting colors on your screen. And you guys who are watching the What's New videos, Bryce, I'm calling up Bryce and I'm like, something weird just happened to Fusion. It changed colors. And of course, Bryce laughs and he's like, yeah, just hit Shift-N. Shift-N will turn it on and off. But of course, you can also just go up here and turn it on and off under the inspect command. So what the heck does this do? It is actually pretty sweet. And I should get in a better habit of using this tool. It gives you colors of your assembly, so it's easier to find components, right? It's a little bit easier to find components over in the tree when you can actually see, kind of like where things are. And if you go in to each components individually and turn them on, you actually also get an indication down here about where things belong. So this color going through the whole thing is actually pretty useful. I don't think it's like anything other than a visual helpful tool, but I mean it just makes it easier to find things, I think, to kind of like locate the different components. So that was really what I just wanted to talk about today. So just to recap, you should definitely spend 5 minutes with the measuring tool if you haven't already. Just get familiar with it. It's one of these tools you always gotta use at some point checking things out. The interference tool, like I said, anytime I create an assembly that had to go to the shop floor, I ran this as a rule just to make sure I didn't make a goof and had some components that was interfering. The curvature comp, zebra analysis, and curvature map analysis are extremely helpful if you're working with kind of what I call swoop surfaces or consumer products. We talked about the intro to sculpting yesterday. They're extremely handful. They're extremely helpful. The draft analysis, if you're doing molds, you want to see kind of like if there's any draft required, negative draft, that's your tool. Section analysis, I hope most of you guys, you definitely see me use it a lot. And then the last, center of mass and component cycling are great for assemblies and figure, kind of like give you some additional help like that. So I hope that was useful, just digging into that. Short live stream today, but it's good sometimes that we keep them less than 30 minutes. Tomorrow's topic is on kind of water jet plasma laser. We're going to talk about the 2D cutting inside of Fusion. Some of you guys pointed out that now where sheet metal is in there, probably important that we point that out. As always, if you haven't already, I would really appreciate if you hit that subscribe button. That gives you a chance to put in notification and you will get notified when these live streams are. And also, hit the thumbs up if you like this. If you don't, be honest, hit the thumbs down. And as always, I really appreciate all your comments, and both in the recorded video and of course also in the live stream. I'm going to do what I normally do. I am, let me just check in here. I can see we got a bunch of people. Does the center of mass take into account of the physical material? You know, that's a good question. I hope so, right? Because if you had, some parts that was made out of cardboard and something that was made out of, steel, it should. I don't have to. We don't have to test that. All right. I really appreciate it. Just check here if there's any other questions. That was a good question, Jacob. I should check that. I gotta check that out now. Cool. I'm gonna end the broadcast, and until the next time, have an awesome day, and I'll see you in the live stream just in a second.